History remembers thousands of kings. Some ruled with wisdom, some ruled with fear, others disappeared into history, almost forgotten. But every once in a while, a leader comes along who changes the world forever, a man whose name echoes through history more than 2,000 years after his death, a king whose military genius is still studied by generals today, a conqueror who achieved what many believed was impossible. His name was Alexander the Great. He was only 20 years old when he became king. Most people at that age are still trying to figure out who they are. Alexander was preparing to conquer the known world. Before his 33rd birthday, he had defeated the most powerful empire on Earth, marched across 3 continents, founded more than 20 cities, and created one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. Even today, historians continue to ask the same question: how could one young man accomplish so much in such a short life? Was it extraordinary intelligence, brilliant military strategy, unbreakable determination, or was Alexander simply destined for greatness? To find the answer, we have to travel back more than 23 centuries to a world filled with war, powerful kingdoms, ruthless ambition, and men willing to risk everything for glory. During the 4th century before Christ, the ancient world was divided. Greece was not a single nation. Instead, it was made up of independent city-states: Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, each one proud of its own traditions, each one determined to protect its own power. These city-states had spent generations fighting one another. Endless wars had weakened Greece. While the Greeks fought among themselves, a much greater power continued to grow in the east, the Persian Empire, stretching from modern-day Egypt, across the Middle East, all the way to the borders of India. It controlled millions of people, countless cities, vast wealth, and an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. Most people believed the Persian Empire could never be defeated. It was simply too large, too rich, too powerful. But far to the north, hidden among rugged mountains and fertile valleys, a small kingdom was quietly preparing for history. That kingdom was called Macedon. Many Greeks looked down on the Macedonians. They considered them uncivilized, too rough, too different. But they were about to discover that they had made a terrible mistake, because in this small kingdom, a young prince was growing up, a boy whose ambition would one day reshape the ancient world forever. His name was Alexander. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the ancient kingdom of Macedon. From the very beginning, stories surrounded his birth. Ancient writers claim that strange signs appeared in the sky. Some believed the gods themselves had chosen him for greatness. Whether those stories were true or simply legends, no one can say for certain. But one thing is undeniable. Alexander grew up believing he was meant to achieve something extraordinary. His father, King Philip II, was unlike any ruler Macedon had ever known. Philip transformed a small and often underestimated kingdom into the strongest military power in Greece. He rebuilt the army, introduced new weapons, created disciplined battle formations, and united lands that had once been divided. While Philip was building an empire with his soldiers, young Alexander was watching everything. He observed military drills, studied strategy, and listened carefully whenever experienced generals discussed war. But Philip understood something important. Winning battles required more than strength. A great king also needed wisdom. So when Alexander reached the age of 13, Philip made a remarkable decision. He invited one of the greatest philosophers in history, Aristotle. Aristotle was already famous throughout the Greek world. His knowledge stretched far beyond philosophy. He taught science, medicine, politics, geography, literature, ethics, and the art of leadership. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed an endless curiosity about the world. He read the poems of Homer, especially the story of Achilles. The legendary warrior became Alexander's greatest hero. He dreamed not just of ruling a kingdom, but of earning everlasting glory. According to ancient historians, Alexander even kept a copy of Homer's Iliad close to him throughout many of his military campaigns, yet books were only part of his education. Every single day, Alexander trained his body as hard as he trained his mind. He learned horseback riding, sword fighting, spear throwing, hunting, and the discipline required to command an army. His determination impressed nearly everyone around him. There was one famous moment that revealed exactly who Alexander was becoming. A powerful horse was brought before the royal court. No one could control it. It kicked, reared, and terrified even experienced riders. Most believed the horse was impossible to tame, but Alexander noticed something others had missed. The horse wasn't wild. It was frightened by its own shadow. Slowly, he turned the horse toward the sun, spoke to it calmly, and climbed onto its back. Moments later, he rode it effortlessly before the entire royal court. The horse became known as Bucephalus, and it would remain Alexander's trusted companion through many of the greatest battles in history. Watching his young son succeed, King Philip is said to have smiled and declared, "My son, seek a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you." Those words would soon prove to be more prophetic than anyone could have imagined, because the greatest adventure in history was about to begin. In 336 BC, everything changed. King Philip II was assassinated during a royal celebration. To this day, historians still debate who was truly behind his murder. Some believe it was a personal act of revenge. Others suspect a deeper political conspiracy. Whatever the truth, Macedon suddenly found itself without its powerful king, and standing in his place was a 20-year-old prince, Alexander. Many believed he was too young, too inexperienced, too weak to hold the kingdom together. Across Greece, several city-states saw Philip's death as the perfect opportunity to break free from Macedonian rule. They thought Alexander would hesitate. They were wrong. Alexander acted with incredible speed. Before his enemies could unite, he marched south with his army, one by one. The rebellious cities surrendered, but one city refused. Thebes. The people of Thebes believed the young king would never dare attack them. Instead, Alexander surrounded the city. After a fierce battle, the walls fell. The rebellion was crushed. The destruction of Thebes sent a clear message across Greece. Alexander was not just Philip's son. He was every bit as determined, and perhaps even more dangerous. Within weeks, Greece was united once again under his command. But Alexander had no interest in ruling a peaceful kingdom. His eyes were fixed on something far greater: the Persian Empire, the richest, largest, and most powerful empire on earth. For generations, Persian kings had dominated the ancient world. Most rulers feared them. Alexander wanted to defeat them. In the spring of 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont with nearly 40,000 soldiers. Before stepping onto Asian soil, Alexander is said to have thrown his spear into the ground. It was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a declaration. He had not come to explore, he had come to conquer. Standing before his army, the young king faced an empire many times larger than his own. The odds were against him, but history has a habit of rewarding those who dare to attempt the impossible. And Alexander was about to fight the first great battle that would change the ancient world forever. Alexander's first major test came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Persian commanders believed the river itself would stop the Macedonian army. They underestimated Alexander. Instead of waiting, he led the attack himself, charging through the rushing water. He fought alongside his soldiers on the front line, against all expectations. The Persians collapsed. It was Alexander's first great victory in Asia, but an even greater challenge was waiting. King Darius III, the ruler of the mighty Persian Empire, determined to crush the young invader once and for all. The two armies finally met at the Battle of Issus. Darius commanded a much larger force, yet numbers alone could not defeat brilliant strategy. Alexander struck directly toward the Persian king. As panic spread, Darius abandoned the battlefield and fled. His army quickly fell apart. The impossible was becoming reality. The greatest empire on earth was beginning to crumble, but one city still stood in Alexander's way: Tyre. Protected by massive walls and surrounded by the sea, it seemed impossible to capture. Alexander refused to give up. He ordered the construction of a massive causeway across the water. After months of relentless fighting, Tyre finally fell. It became one of the most remarkable sieges in military history. With the eastern Mediterranean now under his control, Alexander marched into Egypt. There, he was welcomed not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The Egyptians honored him as their new ruler. During his time there, Alexander founded a new city, Alexandria. It would grow into one of the greatest centers of learning, trade, and culture in the ancient world. But Alexander's greatest battle was still ahead. One final victory would decide. Alexander the Great became one of the greatest conquerors in human history. He defeated powerful armies and built a massive empire that stretched from Greece to Persia, Egypt, and India. But every great journey has an ending. After years of battles, Alexander reached Babylon, where his health suddenly became weak. In 323 BC, at the age of only 32, Alexander the Great passed away. After his death, his empire was divided among his generals and slowly collapsed. However, his name survived through history. His courage, military skills, and leadership are still remembered today. Alexander was not just a king, he was a legend whose story continues to inspire millions around the world.